Alright, this place is a mess. Alright, what is up everyone? Welcome to my unusually untidy drum room. I really try to keep it like super clean and because I can't really focus when there's stuff laying around all the time. But yeah, welcome to my little drum room, I guess you can call it. It's actually sort of a rehearsal space, but I'm not really with a band right now, so I'm trying to I'm telling myself this is my drum studio. That's kind of where, at least that's what I want it to be in the future. I'll be talking about that later. But yeah, egg crates and everything. Welcome. Today we'll be looking into mic angles and mic placements. I saw this video by it's called the Recording Revolution. I think is the name of it, the channel on YouTube, where a guy talked about mic angles, not necessarily for drums, but mic angles in general, and how you can use them to your advantage by facing. If you have a cardioid pattern microphone, like a standard dynamic mic, you can point like the back of it towards a source you do not want it to pick up. You don't want it to pick up. So, for example, a tom mic, you can try to angle the back side of it to face the closest cymbal, because then it won't actually pick up as much bleed from the cymbal, so you'll get a more pristine sound. But yeah, I'm gonna mess around a little with that, and I've been sort of using that to my advantage before, but not as much. So I'll be taking that more into consideration, and I'll also be. He also talked about how you can work the horizontal plane with your mics to angle them towards the source in a different way. I mean, you know about angling mics, downwards towards the center to capture more attack, or downwards towards the rim of the drum to capture more ring. But he mentioned actually facing them kind of off axis towards the source to pick up the sound in a different way. Because if you say for a snare drum, if you point the mic straight at it, it will sound in a specific way, and if you angle the mic a little sideways, it will pick up the frequencies in another way. So I haven't actually messed around with that before. I'm gonna try that today. Mess around mostly with the snare drum and bass drum and the overheads. They're technically overheads, but I actually use them sort of as room mics, and I'll show you guys my entire mic setup later. But I'm gonna mess around a little with that. I have changed some things already on the kit. I swapped out my snare head yesterday from the Evans EC1 reverse dot that I've been using before into a Evans heavyweight, and I have had that head before. It's actually an old one, kind of beat up, but it does sound great, so I'll be using that again. But yeah, I'm gonna swap. I've already swapped that out and worked on a bit of more of a open snare sound. It's starting to sound great, but I still have some fine tuning to do when it comes to overtones. But as I mentioned, I have moved some cymbals around, and I'll show you in a second. So I'll have to move around the room mics, if you will, a little to try to capture a better cymbal sound. The cymbal sound has been really good before. I think that's one of the best parts about the previous drum mixes. The cymbals and the bass drum are sounding great as well. But now that I moved things around, I'll have to make some changes to make it sound hopefully even better. So yeah, let's get to work. I'll show you guys the kit to get started. Okay, so here's what the setup is going to look like from now on. I've actually just moved the right side crash from over the 12-inch rack tom off to the side, so it's beyond the floor tom. It feels great to have it way over there. I've played kits that had that setup before, but I haven't really brought it to my own, so I figured why not. And it actually feels really good, so I'll be having that way over there now. And except for that, the only main difference from that I've done so far is, as you can see, the old beat up, the coatings coming off and everything, the old beat up heavyweight head. And since I moved the crash way over there, I've had some more space for the stack and the splash, and for the tom mics to be between them and not risk touching the cymbals, because that happened a bit before. Everything was too tight and too close to each other. So that's kind of the only difference right now with the kit. As I said, I'll be getting tom heads hopefully tomorrow. And don't worry, the EMAD on the floor tom will stay, at least for now. It's getting kind of beat up and old, but it will stay for now. I really enjoy that sound. Hopefully, I'm going to mess around with the tuning a bit and see if I can get it to open up just a little more. But it does sound great. I love having it on there. It's kind of become my little signature thing, so I'm keeping that. Don't worry, every lover of the EMAD out there. But the rack toms, I'll be putting Evans G2 coated heads on, and I'm changing the resonant heads to Evans resonant glass heads as well. They're coming in tomorrow, so hopefully. So yeah, we'll see. So today I'm gonna mess around mostly, as I said, with the cymbal angles, and not really for the toms then, because I'll be working on that once I get the new heads. But for the snare drum, and I'm gonna tune the snare drum a bit and see where I can go with it. Finish up the tuning on that one. And I mentioned I have these room mics, or kind of overheads, whatever you want to call them, way here in the back actually. These are AKG C 391B microphones. Yeah, tricky name, but they're way there in the back, and the reason for this is I actually saw some videos with Mike Johnston, you know, the amazing drum instructor on YouTube and everything. He's an awesome player, and he has a great sound on his kit and his cymbals. So I noticed, like, one time when watching his videos, like, he doesn't actually have any overheads. Where are his overheads? Why does his cymbals sound so damn good, but he doesn't have any microphones, or what's going on? And then I noticed, like, in the far back, he has these two microphones. They're kind of large diaphragm microphones, unlike these. But he has those in the back, and I guess those pick up the main part of the cymbal sound, and probably a lot of the kit sound as well. That's kind of why it sounds so rich and full. But yeah, so I figured I'd take the mics that I have and mess around with that. So I've had these way back there, pointing in kind of towards each side of the kit for a pretty long time now, and it actually sounds really good having them back there. It changes the sound a little bit. I think the cymbals don't get so harsh in the mix, I think, because if you have the overheads like pointing down, the height differences and everything from the cymbals can really come into effect, and it can become a little bit unbalanced. Long story short, I think I got a better sound and easier sound to capture when I have these in the back than actually having them over the kit as normal overheads. So definitely something to mess around a little with if you haven't tried this. But yeah, I'll list all the microphones just to keep the video length down a little. I'll list them all in the description. You can go down and read that if you're interested in all the microphones. But now I'm gonna hook up my computer to my interface. I'll be writing down the interface and the mixer board and everything in the description as well. But I'm gonna hook everything up and start messing around. I'm gonna record with what I have right now, and then I'm gonna make some changes, record again, compare the two, and kind of see where it goes. And I'll finish up the snare tuning probably first. So catch you guys in a little bit. I have learned so many things. Like, you have no idea. So sorry. So I messed around with what I was talking about with moving the mics and everything. Starting with the snare drum, I tuned the snare drum and it sounds amazing. It still has that crack, that very prominent crack, and you can really hear the tone. But it's a lot more open than before. So there's a lot more overtones, but not excessively much. So it's just a perfect mix. It sounds great. It's a lot of fun to play on. King drums and Evans drum heads. What can I say? But okay, enough marketing. The snare sounds great. Moving on. I thought maybe I should try what I was talking about with moving the microphones. So I started messing around with moving the snare mics, and what I found was, well, I started with sort of just aiming them down and aiming them sort of at the center, at the rim, what I usually do, and then I started messing around with the horizontal plane. And that's where things really got interesting. So what happened was, I tried to take the snare drum mic like underneath the hi-hat, pointing at the snare, and pointing either off to the side, like almost at one of the lugs on the side, and then comparing that to what it sounded like pointing at the center. So I recorded each one and listened back to them, and sort of listened for where it sounded the best, simply because the tuning is great. So the snare drum sounds great on its own. Now I just needed to get picked up well by the microphones. So and then I did the same thing, but just not under the hi-hat, more in front of the snare, and still the same thing, pointing it at the center and pointing it more towards the side. And when I pointed it more towards the side, so like half of the mic is facing the drum, then I got a lot more overtones. Like all of the overtones pretty much that exist in the snare went straight into the mic. So I didn't really like that. So eventually I found this position where it sounds great, and at least for now, that's where I'll leave it. It really does sound good, but when I get the tom heads, so start messing with the tom mics and bring the whole picture together. Maybe I'll change some things, so I won't actually go too much into detail showing you exact placements right now. We'll get to that later when everything is set. So I did the same thing with the bottom mic for the snare. So first I kind of tightened the snare wires to try to get that exact sound that I wanted. Eventually I found it, and now the snare, each ghost note is very, like, you can really hear every single stroke, and it sounds great overall. So then I needed the mic to pick up that, so I started doing the same thing, just moving it back and forth, pointing at different places, trying different things, and eventually I found a place. I kind of moved it out a bit, so it let the drum breathe a little before it reached the mic. I did the same thing with the top mic, by the way, so it's kind of far away from the drum, like this far, like probably an inch outside of the rim, actually. So not really over the snare, as you see some guys miking their snares. Same thing underneath, and it sounds great. It picks up the right amount of frequencies, and overall it sounds good. So experiment with that. It really did a lot. Like, the snare sounds better than ever, in my opinion. It's not mixed at all or anything, and it sounds so good. So let's see. Hopefully I'll keep it that. I will be able to keep it that way, and it will get even better later. But yeah, moving on to, sorry, I can't hold this damn iPad anymore. My arm is kind of killing me. So moving on to the room mics in the back, or the overheads, whatever. Let's just call them room mics because they're technically acting as room mics, even though they're typically overheads. But room mics. I started with measuring, because I used the snare drum as my reference point. So I started with measuring the distance from each of them to the snare to make sure they're equidistant to the center of the snare drum. Same thing with their height and their angle of the drum, of the microphones. And after doing that, I usually do that. I just wanted to make sure that, since now I'm really doing everything like thoroughly, I wanted to make sure that they're sitting right. So eventually it got to the point where, okay, it sounds great, but then I went in and listened to the isolated tracks, like the left side and the right side separately, and I noticed something that I've noticed sometimes before, but I haven't really thought too much about it. Like the right side mic, the sound that I got recorded into the right side mic was always more high pitched in a way. It had more high frequencies, basically. And the left side sounded more muted, almost. Not in a bad way, but it had less of these like high frequencies. So I was like, why is this? Because the mics, I thought, like, are the mics different? Like, is one of them a little bit older or whatever? You know, some malfunction. I don't know, something like that, or something with the settings on the mics. You can change some things. You know, like removing low frequencies in a pad, removing some decibels and whatever. So I made sure that that's the same, and then I actually swapped the mics to see, like, okay, is it the mic itself that's picking up things differently? But no matter what I did, it's still, the right side still sounded more high had more high frequencies. And I was just listening to a single snare drum stroke looped around like a machine gun, and it just kept sounding all weird, like more high frequencies on the right side. So I was like, why is this? Like, what's going on? I've removed every single variable, and then it kind of struck me, like, hang on, the room, right? The room must be doing something. I had even removed the cymbals because I thought I have bigger and more bright cymbals on the right side of the kit, so I thought maybe the snare kind of reflects and bounces out, and, you know, whatever. And that wasn't the case either, so it kind of struck me that maybe it's the room. So if you can see over here on the left side of the kit, it's all black, right? I have these pieces of cloth like in front of the windows and also like attached to the wall. But on this side, see that corner? Oh, sorry, that's the wrong corner. This is confusing. That corner. You can see I only have the cloth on the wall, and then there's these egg crates and all the heads and everything. So that's much more of a reflective surface. So high frequencies reflect off of like reflective surfaces more than when it's absorbed by the cloth on the other side. So it makes perfect sense. Like I have to deal with this side of the room in order to get them to sound more or less exactly the same. And that's kind of what I want, because it's easier to work with it that way, and I don't want it to sound different when they're picking up the same thing just from each side. So that's a big conclusion I drew right there. Like, okay, I have to treat that side of the room, and that's the plan I have. I want to like acoustically treat the entire room and make it, as I mentioned, kind of make a drum studio out of it. But I don't have the money for that right now, so maybe one day. But I'll definitely have to start with this side, because that makes a really big difference in the whole mix eventually. So I just messed around with the room mics and snare today, and I learned so much. I mean, it already starts to sound better than ever before, and I'm really glad I'm taking all this time to be doing this thoroughly. So I recommend you, if you're gonna do anything similar, take your time, experiment, like do crazy things, like try angling weird angles and whatever, because it will pay off. So I'm super stoked to tomorrow, hopefully. Fingers crossed. Let's hope the heads arrive tomorrow so I can start working on the toms. Otherwise, I guess I'll just have to practice or whatever. So, yeah, that's basically it for today. It's like 9 p.m. I gotta go home and get something to eat. So yeah, I'll catch you guys tomorrow. Hope you enjoyed this little episode thing. Let me know if you like watching these vlogs. I'm thinking I enjoy making them, so I'm thinking maybe I'll make more of these in the future. Especially when I'm doing these kinds of things, when I'm changing stuff up and doing, major projects and whatever. I'll probably document some of it at least. So let me know if you enjoy this, and I'll post more. But catch you guys tomorrow, and I'll go through more of the setup and the exact mics, the exact mics that I use. And as I mentioned before, you can read about them in the description right now, actually, if you want to see the names of the mics. But yeah, catch you guys tomorrow.